How goes, Eric?
Okay, Sam, get my
Hey,
video. Yeah, hi.
hey, you're
Oh,
there.
yeah, doing well. How are you?
Let's see. Did you see there may be someone joining us that we've never met before?
No, I didn't. Where was that announced? Facebook.
It was in the Messenger and Facebook Messenger in the Collaborology group and also in the GCC group. I
All
think you're a
right.
member there, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm in the Facebook. I don't read it all the time. Let me check. Let's see.
Not crucial. She said she would join. Hopefully she does.
Okay,
I got connected with her this past week or two because she's very concerned about the state of this country.
sure.
And I've been posting material regarding the state of this country, as you may have.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, "Why isn't there a forum where we can talk about this?" She did a post.
Yep,
And I said, "Hey, why don't you come on Saturdays and Sundays?"
yep.
And she was interested. So I think it might actually happen.
Okay, cool.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
One thing I watched recently was Tristan Harris's TED Talk about AI ethics going forward. The issues he brings up that we need to be on top of.
I'm glad. What's the TLDR?
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Barry. Just getting
Hi.
ready.
Hey, Barry.
Hi. Okay. So we all know that the race going on with AI is insane and has many downsides, especially like children, and there should be um, agreements about the path forward. For example, um, like restrictions on AI companions for children. There should be um, some form of liability for companies that produce AI that is harmful. And like because of all the risks, he outlines several points. In um, Yeah, so let me just find the link and put it in while we're checking in. Um, but it makes a lot of sense to get on top of this now. Let me find it. Tristan.
Did he
Yep.
mention anything about Grok specifically?
He um Nothing, not specifically, but let me give you this link here.
Because if anybody's going to train for ulterior motives and AI and has the
Hmm.
resources to do it, I believe Elon is candidate number one.
Yeah, but okay. I mean, I think there would have to be some yeah, he'd essentially have to rewrite all of history to get it to be the way he wants.
I don't think it's that hard. I think it just tells them
Yeah.
context, hey, just do the following. Never put me in a bad light. Always talk well of blah, 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 blah. Always talk
Hmm.
well of Tesla. I think he
Yep.
can do it in context.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
do that to any minion that you hire.
Yeah. So what I was thinking is, shouldn't there be like a badge that would require some compliance, some validation by a third party, some testing by a third party that a company can earn, and it should be like more of like an incentive
Yep.
for companies to earn this badge that's not a punishment.
Yep.
That's what I'm thinking should work.
In fact, I think there is an AI ethics consortium or forum or whatever. I'm pretty sure I signed up to try and get their notifications. But I also think that that's why some of these open source models are
Hmm.
particularly interesting because it's weird, but if you can actually see the vector database, I mean, you don't really know how to interpret it, but at least it's open. If you actually see the training data sets, if you actually see each of the training stages and what they do, and you see the tests, that goes a long way towards being trustworthy. And all these closed ones don't do that. DeepSeek, I think, did do that. And I think we might have several others. So that's why I think the open source models are the ones worth experimenting with. But
Right.
they can be
But
subverted also. So I'm not
sure.
confident.
Yeah, I guess it's a question of minimizing the risk of bad actors getting too much control or
Yeah.
too much of a few companies, few big companies controlling the major
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they could just
Thanks
keep
for
throwing
checking.
money at it.
Yeah, let's revisit that. Thanks for checking in. Let's see if Barry or Stacey or I or Read.ai bot wants to check in.
We're gonna have bots checking in one day.
That's right. They're going to come and say, well, here are the minutes from the last meeting. And how do you feel about that?
This is what we're gonna talk about today, you humans.
That's right.
They,
Human,
they emulate,
How about if they check in and they say, Sam, I found this that you might be interested in. Eric, I found this that you might be interested in. I wouldn't have a problem with that.
yeah, yeah. In fact, separate from these Zoom sessions, they're probably already being set up to do that.
they not only can keep track of the user's emotional state, but they do a very reliable job of emulating emotions as if they had any.
Hmm.
They're quite sociable in that regard.
So they're good liars.
Yeah,
Excellent
and
liar.
they're good actors, and actors basically have to emote in a realistic way, even though as an actor they're actually not feeling the emotion that they're emulating.
I'm going to go back and I'm going to say they're good liars.
Yeah, yeah. Not
They
just
learn
liars. They're
they
good
learn
actors.
everything from us.
But they're better than politicians at it.
Hmm.
They're more realistic. Like when Hegseth lies, it's ridiculous.
When all of them lie, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, especially Hegseth. He's a real Lulu.
Anyway, I think that more than lying, it's lying with an ulterior motive, which could be called seduction. They want you to trust them.
Yeah.
And that level of seduction can be quite sophisticated.
Well, the more power somebody has and the less education they have, the less I trust them. The, the, they may be authoritarian, but they're not authoritative.
Yeah. By the way,
Yeah.
wasn't yesterday the death knell of democracy in this country?
Tomorrow's the name of a movie or something?
No. You didn't catch what happened with the Supreme Court?
That was Friday.
I thought you said tomorrow.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there were like 5 issues decided on Friday.
You meant yesterday?
Yeah, yesterday.
Yesterday was Saturday. Did the Supreme Court rule? That was Friday, wasn't it?
Yep.
Yes.
It wasn't yesterday, it was Friday. Yeah, they ruled that a local, not a local, but a regional judge cannot make a national ruling or something to that effect.
I thought it was worse than that.
There were some child protection issues, but other than that, things about immigration and anchor baby, yeah, birthright citizenship. Yep.
Hey, Kayla.
Hi, Kayla.
This is the height of their hypocrisy,
Good
right?
morning.
Morning.
We're still doing check-in. Erica mentioned that he just saw a TED Talk last night about AI and ethics. And then I think Barry, Stacey, and I haven't really checked in yet, but always it gets to be the administration's lies. Barry in particular mentioned Hegseth, Hog's breath.
Hogsmeade.
And then yeah, Stacey and I were talking about the extent to which AIs could lie. And my point, they lie to seduce, because I think the seduction part is to get them to be trustworthy, so that you put your trust in them and
Right.
be good about that. Anyway, so I think from my recount, that might be where we stand. Anybody else want to give an update for Kayla?
I like that about, AI and ethics. I think that's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is a good talk. I know that there have been organizations set up around AI and ethics. I don't know how influential they are, but it's been attempted. And I mentioned that I think if anyone were to subvert the trust of the public and train an AI for their own villainous objectives, it would be Grok, because Elon is behind Grok.
Rock is the name of the AI engine on X.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh,
Keeping track of all these.
I'm gonna put you guys on mute.
Keeping track of all these product names is really a mess, especially in Linux. The names of the applications in Linux, I can't keep track of what their applications really are.
It's not that hard. All you have to do is grow up for the last 40 years and get to know them as they come on the scene. Yeah. Anyway, so that's the check-in status. Anyone else?
So do you know if Beth is coming today?
Well, she did text me yesterday saying she would not be there yesterday and that she would be there here today. I did not remind her today. I didn't want to seem like a stalker.
Did you make sure she has the password?
I made sure she had the exact link that Stacey has been sending to others. I found Stacey's post in the history of our chats, and I just forwarded that one. So if that one worked, then she should
All
have
right.
that one.
All right.
She's been trying to text me if anything didn't work. Let me just double check that.
Because if you're coming back the second week in a row and you just click, I've been here before, then you got to type in the password.
Let me see if she's sending me anything.
The link that I give to anybody, for whatever reason, doesn't require a password. And I get it by going through my old email. Like I have it saved in my email somewhere. I don't know why it's different than the others, but it is.
Because if it came in an email, then it would have the encrypted password.
No, but I actually got it out of Messenger a long time ago. I think Josh gave it to me.
Still would have had the encrypted password.
I think it
By
does.
the way, I talked to Tyra yesterday.
Oh yeah? How's our
Yeah,
how's our
she was
friend?
asking how you guys are doing, and she told me basically why she left.
Is that public knowledge now? Can you disclose?
Yeah, I could disclose it. She left because of Josh.
Josh left because of Sam.
Do my job.
She said that she might pop in, and she felt like, the forum was really for, fun and engagement. That's how she felt it was for her. But she just didn't like, one particular person. She told me in depth what had happened, and I gave her my experience, and, we had to talk about that. But she said that she would love to pop by sometime and make sure you guys aren't bullying me. That's what she said.
We'd love to meet Vernon.
Huh?
We'd love to meet Vernon at some point.
Oh, she told me what Vernon thought one time, and he was listening, and
Oh, you want?
it was funny. Well, different folks,
That's
strokes
perfectly
for
fine
different
to share
folks.
too, if he feels okay with that.
Vernon's awesome. He's a different guy. I love him.
So I pasted in the chat the 5 main points from Tristan Harris's TED Talk, and these are action items where we could contact representatives and advocate for these points. So the first one is ban engagement optimized AI companions for kids, then establish basic liability laws, pass increased whistleblower protections for people working at AI companies who find stuff going on, prevent AI from having legal rights, that it shouldn't enter the court system deciding in favor of an AI. Humans come first. And oppose state moratoriums on AI regulation. And it mentions something that Ted Cruz is trying to put through for Texas to prevent them from stopping AI.
And federal moratoriums on AI regulation.
Right. I don't know if there's one yet, but yeah, if more states do this, there would be a federal.
Feds are the first in Project 2025 to say states may not impose restrictions on AI. I think that's one of Project 2025's provisions.
So they want the race to let the money interests control everything. Is that the point?
Whoever got the power.
Mm-hmm.
Stacey.
Yes.
So I hope it comes across that I'm the kind of person that I always try to be balanced. So in trying to be balanced, since usually I'm always saying something negative about using AI, I just thought of one good use for AI. I would like to have an AI summary attached to every new legislation that would point out what the legislation is saying and what the possible concerns for people to think about might be. Because, I mean, first of all, I have a real problem with the language used in legislation. There is no legitimate reason that I could see that we do everything with legalese. It makes no sense other than to keep people from understanding what's in the documents. So that would be my suggestion, that an AI summary has to accompany all new legislation. Over.
And whose AI summary? Elon Musk's AI summary versus.
Maybe we choose three, and the
Yeah.
three have to work together and point out where the other is being biased. Maybe we need AI to police AI.
Need
Can
meta
I
AI.
can I interject, Stacey? Because
Sure.
the state of California, Cal Matters, has already done that with the California legislation.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, you should check it out. I forgot what it's called, but if you go into Cal Matters, it'll gosh, what is it called? Anyhow, just go into Cal Matters and fish around, and then maybe my brain will remember, and then I can put it in the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So California is a laboratory where they're doing an experiment, and we'll see if it catches on to other states.
No, it's great because what it does is it also, keeps the politicians accountable. So you can look up a politician and see like the history of, the legislation that they passed, or they're for or they're against, and then
Yeah,
it'll
very
also
important.
show
That's
like
great.
what gifts that they have given, or what's on the other side of that too. Like for instance, if there's a certain bill that is being, is in the committees, and it'll say like that this bill is backed by big pharma or something, and what it opposes. So it's a really interesting tool. You can get lost in it.
Well, the other piece to this, and it would be good if politicians actually embraced it, is that if the AI were to point out a consideration that hadn't been thought about and they actually wanted to work together, they could rewrite pieces to account for those concerns. Wouldn't that be a novel approach?
So they also are doing that too. We got a sneak peek of that. This is not in for public consumption, but what they will do is they'll summarize like what's going on in the state of California and suggest some newsworthy pieces to write on that.
I think the biggest problem we face right now is that politicians are really not incentivized to work together to come to solutions. They're incentivized to not work together, to not come to solutions.
Incentives are very important, any path forward. And what I'm thinking is that there's a lot of people with free time who could be reading these AI summaries and commenting and yeah, getting together in groups, coffee shops, and I mean that's
How about
really yeah.
how about in schools?
Yeah,
Well,
right.
yeah, if it fits
Universities.
if it fits the school's agenda. Hmm.
Well,
Yeah, think
that,
about
that that's where I see a different kind of public education. I
oh
mean,
yeah.
just imagine that we had, these things on PBS and schools were hooked in to
Mhm.
watching, public broadcasting, and there was, an interplay between those things, and it was open to everybody. I'm just
Yeah.
throwing out, just spitballing here.
Stacey, did you opt out of Read Analytics?
I don't know.
Because you've been talking nominally and it doesn't show you as one of the people who's doing any talking. The
I think
talk
didn't
time you're not listed.
didn't we decide last time, because I brought that up last time, I think it only is monitoring the chat.
Um, I haven't put anything into chat and I've talked a little bit and I've got 2% of talk time.
Yeah.
And Eric has 66% of talk time.
Yeah, I said a few weeks ago, I don't believe that thing is lying. It's not accurate. I don't know what it's talking
Because
about.
you can't opt out of it, so that's why I asked.
No, I did not physically do anything. At least not that I know of. And at least not as it regards to this call.
I've not seen the numbers update on previous calls, no matter yeah, so I don't think it's accurate.
Maybe it just kind of maybe just stopped after the first.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When AIs encounter technical issues, they don't necessarily tell people. And I just had an experience with that where an AI I was working on had a technical problem for several weeks, and it was only this weekend that we found the real problem, why all our tests were not getting anywhere. So, unless you have people who can diagnose these issues and human logic to figure out what's going on, the AIs will just run wild, and you don't know what they're doing.
Misdiagnoses outpace diagnoses by about 4 to 1, probably including that ratio that I just diagnosed.
So you need people with the skills to test them and prompt them and find the anomalies and find the edge cases. So see, there's a different skill set than previous decades of programming and testing. Now it's programming in English and testing in English and guessing where the problem is and learning about the limits. So, like this specific problem was due to a 256K character limit in prompts. So, by exceeding that limit in the knowledge base, so it never updated with new data, and we were stuck with old data all this time we were testing. What a mess, you know?
It's really is really hard to diagnose complex things where you don't really have deep knowledge of how they work.
Right. But you remember when the space shuttles blew up?
Oh yeah.
They diagnosed it down to the part. They had all the documentation and the people. They were able to do a logical train of thought and get right down to the problems and fix them.
Yeah.
It took a few years, but they fixed them.
I would say it took a few years. That's the point.
Yeah, that's human ingenuity and human deduction. If
Wait a
they,
minute. That was the O-ring you're talking
yeah,
about.
the O-ring,
It
and
didn't
then
take a few years. They knew that right away because I was working for somebody. I was working with somebody whose husband like sold a part.
okay,
They
they
knew right away.
diagnosed it right away.
They knew right away.
But
The low level people knew it right away, but the high level people didn't get the message.
Oh, okay.
Right. But it took a few years to get it flying again.
Oh,
Yeah.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, you can have some obscure person who knows it, but nobody pays attention to them.
Yeah, I know that story.
It's pretty commonplace. It goes all the way back to the biblical prophets who knew what was going to happen, but nobody believed them.
Now that Sam is back, I'm going to use this as my check-in because there was something that came up on another call, and then the thought came to me later. So I want to go back to it. Barry, we were briefly talking about, you brought up free will versus determination. And you mentioned about probability and numbers. We were talking about that whole thing. And what I wanted to say, and I got to remember how I wanted to word it. So I had mentioned that I believe there was free will within boundaries, and that, what you said about probability and numbers backs that up. But what I also wanted to say, especially if people are thinking in terms of, are we stuck inside the matrix? The fact that there are infinite possibilities also means there is that possibility of getting outside the matrix, which would mean that that possibility of free will and a different outcome does exist. Over.
I have to process that to determine whether or not I understand it and agree with it.
Okay. I just wanted to get it out.
Yeah, that was more than I can process in
I
parts
understand.
in real time.
Sam?
I was curious, how come you wanted to wait till I got here before you stated that?
Because you were interested in that conversation too.
Yeah, I'm firmly in the camp that says you can't really argue that. It's basically a vacuous argument, and I can define that later. But if you're gonna live life, you got to live life as though you do have free will. There's no other way to live life. So, from a practical, personal, day-to-day perspective, I don't think it's useful to think of yourself as having no free will. That's my position on it. Over.
Yeah. I agree with being uncoerced. If everything you do is coerced by some ruling authority figure, then you don't have free will. But if you get to the point where you can opt to do something among a set of choices, you can choose them essentially at random, and that feels like free will. Like I have a free day. What can I do today? And you say, well, what haven't I done lately? And sort of pick one haphazardly, and that feels like free will because it's not coerced. But it's also basically rolling the dice, casting lots. It's choosing effectively at random.
Yeah. And so, Sam, I agree with you. And so my reason for saying that is basically, even if there's only a 1 in a million chance that you could bust outside whatever it is you think you want to bust outside of, it's worth it for that 1 in a million chance, even if that's all you believe. So I do agree with what you're saying. I believe you should act as if you have free will.
What was that Jim Carrey movie where he was inside of a
The
reality
Truman
show?
Show?
He figured out
The
that he was in
Truman
a
Show.
reality.
Was it
The
called
Truman Show.
And it was because of the repeated patterns, the same car going around the block. You know, he saw these repeated patterns in the set, and then he thought, why is that same red car going around the block every so many minutes? And he began to realize that there was periodic patterns that wouldn't be there if it was reality.
I have to
That's
watch
really hard
that
to
movie.
detect. That's very hard to detect.
I don't think I saw that movie.
You ever saw The Truman Show?
No.
Me neither.
It's actually one of the very few movies I actually watched. But
You gotta
yeah,
watch.
he figures out that he's in a reality, or he's in some kind of a controlled environment and not. And he gets to the edge. He gets to the edge of the set, and he finds the boundary of the set, and like the stage door leads to the alley effectively. He finds the exit.
I never saw that movie, but I know what it's about. But for me, that's sort of how I believe about life, but in it, not the way you described it. I believe that there are those probabilities. So the probability that that red car would be passing is a very great probability. But that doesn't mean it's going to be exactly the same every time.
That's the point. It was the same every time exactly on Clockwork. Good, Sam.
Okay, so when we talk about infinities, there are infinitely many infinities. And let me explain what that means. If we do have free will and we sit down, Barry and I, let's say, or Stacey, you and I sit down in front of a chessboard, are those moves predetermined? Or can we actually make moves that are rule compliant, but then look at those probabilities of the possible games involved? And if you think that's mind-blowing, consider Go. You guys know what the game Go
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
I know.
Astronomical number of legal games.
It's way beyond astronomical. Okay. So what I'm saying is that just because there are infinitely many X's doesn't mean that anything is possible. Okay. In a 1 and an X probability stance, because you take that and then you consider another condition which has just the same likelihood. Okay. Then you take another condition that has just the same likelihood, and that goes up geometrically / exponentially. Okay. To beyond where it's actually beyond the number of particles in the universe.
Yeah.
Those
True.
possibilities.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So that does not imply that whatever possibility you can imagine could exist. I think that's the wrong interpretation. And that's a logical fallacy that's executed many, 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 many times when people hear the word infinite. Okay. So I just want to put that on the record. Over.
There may be an astronomical number of legal games of chess or checkers or Go, but there's probably even more illegal games that if you count the number of illegal positions that you could not have gotten to legally, they probably vastly outnumber the number of legal, and the number of legal is astronomical.
Right.
And now take everything you both said and apply that to diagnosing problems.
Exactly.
So can you see yourself when you're playing? Can you think about your thought process? What may be leading me to move this pawn? It could be a whole history. It could be your upbringing or anything coming in that moment. So there could be some determinism there,
Yes.
but now if you can recognize your internal patterns and decide to change them, is that you exerting free will? Like, say I'm living my day based on how people react to my YouTube videos, which you can do these days and see their stats, and then that decides, well, okay, what I'm going to do next in my day. People are getting sucked in.
There's a perfectly legal game of chess called Fool's Mate, in which the one player's first two moves are really ridiculously stupid, and yet it's a possible game. But it's very improbable except for somebody who's just demonstrating.
Yeah, it could be a strategy to throw your opponent off their rocker and then eventually win.
But the fact that there's a literature on Fool's Mate
Sure.
tells you that a perfectly legal, idiotically ridiculous game.
There was a good miniseries about
non-zero
chess.
probability, but you would never see it in a real tournament.
Yeah, there was a mini-series called The Queen's Gambit.
Oh, that was good.
Oh, I love that one.
Yep.
Anya?
About chess. Yep.
Anya Taylor-Joy?
I don't know the actress.
Yeah, that's her.
No.
So when you try to do the probability of enormously large numbers of possibilities, it's easy to get lost in the weeds.
Yeah. So I just want to caution that don't hear the word infinite and then think an implied conclusion simply because, oh, it's possible. And
There's
I
typical
have
words
this
like
reaction, by the way, when people use the word quantum. I think people really, really misunderstand the word quantum and how that works. I'm not claiming I understand it, but I know when I see a misinterpretation of it. And a lot of quacks are using the word quantum and applying it to their own practices with
The smallest infinity is called countable. If you can have a finite number, which if you make a list, the list comes to an end. If you can make a list that goes on forever, but every possibility can be given a number, that's called countable, and that's the smallest infinity.
Okay, I did something interesting recently with AI where I asked it about Euclid's proof that the number of prime numbers is infinite, and it explained it to me, and I had it write a Python script to demonstrate that. And the feeling is, okay, now why I don't have to think anymore. Like it can tell me the logic of the proof. It can explain the if I spent an afternoon thinking about that proof, it is really fascinating how that actually works. You know,
If you think that there's a finite number, you multiply them all together and add
right?
one.
Yeah,
And
that's the
that's a
proof.
trivial proof that there's got to be one more after that.
Well, it's a
You get
remainder of one all the time.
Yeah.
And if that number is prime, great, you have a larger number. If it's not prime, then there has to be a factor greater than the numbers you multiplied together. And that's greater. So there's an infinity of primes that can be generated inductively in that
proof
case.
is easy. Yeah, the proof is easy to understand, but there's a countable number of primes because you can list them in sequential order. So
Right.
you know, the 1 millionth prime is a uniquely defined one of the primes.
I
So is
have,
that
For any
I'm sorry.
integer, you can say what's the corresponding prime of that number in the infinite list. The number of lists.
Stacey was trying to say something.
Yeah, I have a genuine question. And I know that it's going to sound like a really ignorant question, but it's really genuine. Why would I care?
Ah.
If you were a mathematician, you would care. If you're
No,
not a
no, no, no,
mathematician,
no.
you
Even
might
if you're
not
not a
care.
mathematician, if you care about your transactions to your bank being secure, if you care about your communications with your kids or your medical doctor or whatever being secure, this is of prime importance. Because
Why?
No pun intended.
yeah, prime numbers are used in
Exactly.
security,
That's right.
encryption.
Before we even had computers, we were learning this. I want to know why 100 years ago, 100, why were people exploring this possibility? I want to know what was the motivation to figure this out? Because I have never understood that.
They wanted to know about the universe. They wanted to know
Yeah.
truth about the universe.
The
And
mathematical
why?
blindness.
Yeah, math research, it's a recreation almost.
Yeah. Euler and others, I'm forgetting it.
Yeah, these are men who had no friends, so they made the numbers their friends.
No. But
No, no.
there has to be a greater why. I mean, if I let my imagination go,
May I
I
Assuming,
can think of one why,
may
but
I
it's
answer the question?
never brought up now. But
May I
yeah,
answer the question?
yeah,
Why does an artist do art?
not the same thing.
Exact reason. It's the same exact reason. Because to mathematicians, mathematics is beautiful. Because the
So
universe,
it's purely for pleasure.
it is
Not-
aesthetic, but it's also a search for truth.
Yeah,
And in a
that's
much
sort of
deeper
how.
way,
It's an example of epistemology. If you think that there's a value in epistemology, then one flavor of epistemology is finding mathematical theorems, which are demonstrably true
Right.
or demonstrably disprovable, which
Right.
is even more important.
right. And also, even before computers, okay, before it was used for cryptography, it is actually a fundamental factor in how you design games. A lot of games depend on the way prime numbers work. I don't know if you're aware of this, but so game design has reflection on some of the ways these numbers work, and it's deeper than you would actually be able to describe typically. Barry, I'm sure
Okay.
can do it.
I'll give you an example. You
No,
know,
I already got the answer. I think Sam, and you can give me a minute, but I think the answer is it has to do with creation. That's
Mhm.
that's at the root of the answer. That's what I
That's
was
what I
looking
hear.
for.
Just another way of thinking about it. When I was in high school, I had a math teacher who encouraged me to do research, to read books that challenged me, and they wanted me to produce a Westinghouse project paper. And they forced me to do that, even though I was never done. They said, "Okay, you got to get this paper done by this date." And the topic was prime numbers and Euler's phi function. So I did research on that, but I never got anywhere. But I produced it and I did an exhibit for a math fair. So that was somebody instilling the love of mathematics into me. And now, in my semi-retirement, that's still drawing me, the elegance of it.
Sorry that I cut you off, Barry. I just wanted to make that one piece clear. And I guess Kayla heard it too. So me and
Yep.
Kayla both heard the important message was that it has something to do with creation.
Or problem
It's a
solving.
model. It can be a model of creation because you're building all other numbers from the primes.
I mean, I've seen it used in recreational problem solving, especially in Sudoku. Believe it or not, prime numbers turn up in Sudoku, but for a reason that nobody here maybe appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, the links between math and art and music, there's all kinds of things that come up. The golden ratio. So, and now with
Octave,
fractals.
fourths, and how they work. And has anybody here heard of Pythagoras's comma?
No, what is that?
No.
It's fundamental to the way music instruments are tuned. Okay, so it turns out the octave from one C, let's say middle C, to high C, those frequencies are related in a 2-to-1 relationship. Okay,
Yeah.
so if C is some frequency, let's call it X, then the octave above it is 2X in frequency. Okay, so that's the octave relationship. Now, if you sort of understand the scale and the way it's laid out, you guys know what a fifth is? A fifth relationship is a 3-to-2 relationship. So if you have a frequency at X, then a fifth above it is 3.2. Sorry, 3 over 2 times that base frequency.
Half again as many, yeah.
That's right. Now, what's
Yeah.
a perfect fourth? A perfect fourth is a 4-to-3 relationship. So these relationships, you can describe them geometrically, you can describe them arithmetically, you can describe them whatever. But if you sort of take a look at the scale, those of you who are musicians know that a fifth and a fourth together, in musical terms, comprise an octave. But if you look at it in mathematical terms, it's not quite exact. And that little leftover set of frequencies, that's called Pythagoras's comma.
Oh, okay. That I didn't know.
And that is why there's so many different tuning systems for instruments. That's why Indian instruments thousands of years ago use a very different tuning system. They have not used certain notes that we use. And then we use sort of, we meaning Western music, let's say. And then there are other notes in other what are called modes, okay, of scales, relationships of whole steps and half steps that we don't use in Western music. And if you understand Bach, he wrote an entire work called the Wohltemperierte Klavier, the well-tempered clavier. Okay, and he experimented with each of those different tuning systems and created a work. There's 24 of them. Okay? So it's fundamental how mathematics influences music. And if you vibrate, introduce a vibrato, that's kind of covering that range and also providing some emotion to the music and some warmth. So it gets very, very, to me, fascinating because the relationship that I'm describing between mathematics and music is there in mathematics with everything else, even if it's not clearly depicted the way this is. The relationship, let's say, between colors and fabrics, and let's say the way light bounces off a certain surface, it's all deeply mathematical. And if you
Well,
understand that, then you can understand, how to play with those phenomena over.
I'd be much more interested in finding out about the comma.
Yes. In fact, if you look up, I believe you all have heard of Pythagoras, right? Just look up
Yeah.
Pythagoras and comma, and you'll see a nice little depiction of it. It's not going to be directly the way I described it, but there are different ways in which you stack up intervals in music and come up with a little bit left over.
My point
Peter,
is
shut
that
up.
my point is when you were talking about numbers, I was getting nauseous inside. Like I can't even let my head go that far. But I would love for all you brainiacs that deal with numbers to focus on the friggin' comma. And
Comma's a pause. Take a pause.
yeah, but there's something inside the
Yeah,
pause.
yeah. I never heard it expressed as Pythagoras's comma, but I knew exactly what Sam was talking about with the intervals. So now notice how Sam was animated as he was talking. This is something he really touched him emotionally, this relationship with math and music. And I think AI loses that dimension of that,
Exactly.
yeah, the human emotion piece of it. And if you're just listening to AI generated music, AI generated videos, it's going to take over unless people use their brains and detect it or and seek the real thing.
You can have affect without neuropeptides
Yeah.
surging. Affect,
Yeah.
affect in general does not require neuropeptides.
Here's
It's
one way to
a
just
broader category than emotions.
the phenomena that Eric is talking about. Pick a song that actually tugs at you, means something to you, actually makes you really sit back and maybe
Toe
breathe
tapping.
more deeply, right? Now, for me, I'll give you an example if you can't think of one. But God, what's her name? Just now I just forgot her name. Anyway, if there is such a song, imagine playing it for an AI bot. Now, what is it going to do to the AI bot? Can the AI bot even pretend that that song influences it in any way? Okay. I think it can do a shallow representation of a pretense. Oh, I really like that song. It made me cry. Okay. It can say shit like that because it's read on the internet. People say that sort of thing, but it's not actually going to have that experience. Now, this is true of almost every conversation. I would argue, by the way, Eric, that conversation you had regarding the proof of infinite primes with AI was just simply regurgitated from some text.
I'm sure it was. Yeah.
It wasn't logically aware of that. It was just regurgitating that text to you.
Right. But when I asked it to write a Python script to do that, then it was it was coming together with several pieces, spitting something out that maybe works. Yeah.
That's the key. Okay. Understand whether or not it actually had the good tests. That's a very good test of AI is whether it understands the tests that are appropriate.
If you played a dirge, would it say, oh, that's a dirge, and therefore it's expressing grief and sadness? Would it recognize a piece of music as a dirge, as the genre?
It would do
Or
mathematical
it know
analysis.
that it was called a dirge because it was in the literature.
It could find a pattern, like repeated notes or whatever it is, a drone.
If it was a novel composition in a dirge, so it's not in literature, would it recognize a novel, newly written dirge as a dirge?
The answer is yes.
Because?
Do you guys know what Pandora is?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Pandora is a music service.
Right.
By a guy, I used to know what his name was, okay? And his whole point was he characterized music according to 230 plus what he called musical genomes. Like if it was a certain a beat pattern, that was one genome. It was a certain volume curve, that was a different genome. If it was fast then slow, that was another genome. If it was an instrument plus a voice, that was another genome. So he characterized it a lot of different ways, okay? So the base frequency, if it's dirge-like, and it's accompanied with some of these other associated genomes, musical genomes, it could easily, and in fact, it does it already. It easily could say, yeah, that's a dirge, or that's a love song, or that's a parody. So yes,
well,
Pandora
that's a classification.
really pushed that envelope there. Okay.
Yeah, that's just a classification problem. But think about the role music has had in people's lives, say 100, 200 years ago. They're going about surviving, growing food, raising animals, and they're singing all the time. And that and then those songs are passed on to generations, and it develops differently in different parts of the world. So that's like, see, AI can look for a PhD thesis about that and regurgitate that, but wouldn't ever feel that what we feel when we hear a story like that. So like, yeah, like I've been studying music from Russia, from the Jewish settlements in Russia, and that has meaning to me. And AI would never know that real meaning.
Sam, you asked a question yesterday that is in relation to this about, AI and going into your social media or any part of your life and summarizing everything. And you asked each of us, like, would you do something like that? Right? That's what I remember, correct?
Yes.
This is precisely why I wouldn't do it. That feeling that I would just rather have that complete human experience of using your human brain to extract what it is, about somebody's life as opposed to AI.
Mm-hmm. So that's definitely yeah, I can understand that. Let me indicate a scenario. If I had the opportunity to visit Gettysburg, look at a hologram of Lincoln, and actually hear him deliver his address, that would fascinate me. And I think, yes, I could understand, yeah, it's a simulation. Yeah, it's the, best compendium of everybody else who's actually studied the event and studied the surrounding context and studied the geography and studied, numbers of people murdered, killed, et cetera, et cetera. So I know that it would be fake. I know that it would be a caricature, but it would still be valuable to me. So I think there's still possible value to be extracted, even though it's inauthentic in the way that you describe, personally.
Yeah, that technology does exist. And an example is when I visited Chicago, there's a Holocaust museum, and you're in a room and you see a hologram of a Holocaust survivor talking to you and answering your questions. And that was done by, I asked the guy afterwards, they had like 2,000 questions that they asked people. And there's an AI searching to answer your questions based on the responses that that person gave, and several people gave. And then there was also a virtual reality experience where you're in a room wearing a headset and you are put back in Eastern Europe, and you're hearing stories. You're really feeling it. You're hearing a dog barking behind you. You're in this immersive experience. So yeah, with the right people and with the right research, these experiences can be made.
Yeah.
And even if it's not perfect,
No, it's not, but you get it.
every little iota that's added to that simulation gets you a little bit closer to being an authentic experience. You'll never reach it, but every little bit will. Like, for example, if you read the words, it would have a certain impact. If you heard someone say those words, to me, that has more impact. If you then see someone with their lips moving, delivering those words, that has even more impact. If I can actually change my perspective and walk around this person as they're speaking and then sort of see the audience, that even has more impact. If I can look up, and see the sky and see, were they dark clouds, were they light clouds, were there hillsides on the horizon, etc., that even adds. So each little bit of detail adds to the experience. It'll never be perfect. I understand that. But it's closer than me just reading 7 years ago in a book of dead trees. That is my point.
Yeah, definitely. Another experience, there's a park where you can hold up your phone, scan a QR code, and then you're in an augmented reality experience. So what the artist did was they took objects from Puerto Rico and brought them into an empty space in Chicago. So you're panning around and you're seeing the colorful sculptures and whatever the artist wanted to show you.
By the way, a little riff on this. You know how cops are required to wear these cop cams on their chest to record every incident?
Yep.
I think every member of government should be required to wear that when they're in any activity with any other government official. And that should be on the record. So we can actually tell what Hogsbreath was saying in that signal chat, or what Trump is doing when he's throwing ketchup on the wall, or all these other things. And that should be a matter of public record. We pay for that administration. We pay for their activities. We require them to do their jobs. And the way they do their jobs should be on the record for the public people. That level of transparency would go a long ways. Maybe not in my lifetime, but in the annals of history, just to indicate, what a dark age we've actually been in ever since the felon took office in January. Over.
Now, Nixon had recordings of all his White House conversations, but there's a gap, something he erased probably. And so
there was nothing there.
Yeah, sure.
15 minutes of the garbage,
Okay, but this reminds me of an experience I had at work where a manager showed me how he could edit an email and change what somebody else had sent in a reply, sending it to someone else. So, yeah, what do you do about that?
DPG
provenance
is your friend.
Yeah.
Doctoring something, yeah.
That just means that you can actually sign an email to indicate whether it's been tampered with, okay?
Sure. But the person getting the email may not be as sophisticated, or that technology wasn't used as much back then. So, yeah, they get fooled by what my manager wants them to think.
And by the way, this is foundational to Doug Engelbart's ideas about everything being on the record. And by the way, this is also foundational to the ledger, the idea behind Ethereum
blockchain.
And blockchains. This is exactly it.
Hash functions.
Whatever it is that guarantees uniqueness, which, by the way, in quantum develops, may not be quite so secure anymore.
Assuming the quantums are stable in qubits.
But they're not, because
they've been amazing.
What are you saying, Barry?
The thing about qubits is that they're based on something that's oscillating. And if you have things that are oscillating in sync, they'll stay correlated. But if you move them apart, timekeeping over here doesn't agree with timekeeping over here, so they drift out of phase. And they don't maintain phase lock synchrony. And that's decoherence.
Is that true of spooky action at a distance still?
That's a different, that term is sort of misinterpreted.
like quantum, it's another term that's often misinterpreted.
Entanglement, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, basically, it has to do with, if you adopt Newton's simplified notion that time ticks at the same rate everywhere and every when throughout the cosmos, then correlations are, anything that's in sync will stay in sync forever. But in reality, according to Einstein, that don't happen.
No, but quantum says if I flip a bit, no matter where it is, and no matter how it got there, that bit should again reflect my state that I just flipped, no matter where in the universe the other end is.
But the mate doesn't flip. The mate over there didn't get the same bit flipping cosmic ray.
No, it's not supposed to. That's the whole point.
That's why Bell's theorem doesn't work. One of the reasons why it doesn't work, because timekeeping varies from here to there. So things that were in sync when they were born drift out of sync when they're apart. It's pretty easy to see that once you realize it.
I appreciate the perspective that says, no, you really want a more authentic experience. But I think an approximation is all we've ever lived with throughout history. You know,
Novels,
static
plays.
pictures, exactly. Words were an approximation for an actual experience.
Yeah.
Words with static pictures are an approximation to the actual experience.
Any dramatization is a
Graphic
synthetic.
novels are a step above, and now it's got more graphic. Then you have, you know, flip pages that give you little 3-second little snips of somebody running or chasing a rabbit or whatever. It's a step towards animation. And then, you know,
Computer
black and white
games are
movies,
very realistic.
and then
You
color
can
movies, and
you
then,
can
you know,
make
all of that. Those are all approximations. And at every step, people got value out of it, and that added to their experience of it. Was it realistic? Some would say they're not at all ever realistic, but they get closer and closer and closer and closer.
I think we're going to have to move to like hybrid models where it's humans plus AI delivering an experience. And an example is if I have a computer backing me up as I play music, well, yeah, I am doing the creative expression and the computer's doing the beat and the bass
accompaniment.
line. Yeah, accompaniment, but it's still it's listenable. If it was just the computer by itself, I don't think it's listenable in certain cases.
Mhm. I
Well,
mean,
that chap at the Media Lab, forget his name at the moment, developed this automatic accompaniment. So you play music and it will accompany you on the piano or whatever in
Yeah,
real time.
yeah, that's freely available in a lot of
That's been around
places
for
these days.
decades.
Right, and I use a program that lets me customize the parameters of that accompaniment. So
Right.
I choose the style and change things. Yes, I'm doing the creative part to accompany myself.
And that chap also writes operas.
Yeah.
but Barry, here's a question for you, right? You're a fan of I forget his first name, but Smolian, right? The
Raymond
legend
Smulyan, yeah.
Raymond, okay? It may not exist, but suppose you had in a recreation 3D with audio, with facial expressions of him delivering his lectures. Would you actually view those? Would you actually consume those?
If they had new content that he might have presented or maybe developed but never presented, yes.
Are you saying as if there was content that was only written, you wouldn't care? You'd already consumed the written form?
Well, for example, he wrote a book called Tamaka Mockingbird, which I owned a copy. I can't find it. I must have given it away. But I would like to see that book presented visually because there's more in it than I could extract by reading it. He envisions a forest full of birds, and a bird makes a call, and some other bird answers it with its call, and you get this chain in and out to the mockingbird in the center. And that's his analogy for this branch of logic called combinatorial logic. I would like to see that animated. And I think people actually may have tried to animate that so that it's easier to absorb it than just reading the text of his book. Go ahead.
Since I'm in the habit of sharing some of my fantasies, I'm going to share another one. One of my favorite science fiction series of books is called the Lensman series. And actually, what I'm going to say applies to all of these series. But there's one called the Lensman series by an author named Edward E. Smith, nicknamed Doc. And it's probably the first and most famous of these genre called space operas. And it's a series of 6 or 7 books. So the seventh is arguable whether it's actually part of the series. I actually would love, and I started this a couple of years ago with a bot. I started by saying, okay, bot, take this chapter, create a scene for every separate little narrative in this chapter, and start creating a movie script, you know, and then add the conversation, add the character depth, add possibly camera angles you would actually use to capture the action, you know, and then fill it in with certain sketchboards of, what it might look like. So now I could take not just a chapter, but an entire book or an entire series and start planning a movie out of it. Okay, now granted, I don't have the budget to hire, let's say George Clooney or anybody to play Kimball Kinnison, but I could have, some of this completely rendered. Now, would it be perfect? Probably not. Okay, but it'd be a different experience of that series. And I am much closer to doing it today than I was several years ago when I started this project. Okay. So that's really fascinating to me because I like it so much. It introduces so many new ideas to the science fiction genre. By the way, just one little aside. It's one of its main characters is a entity called Arisia, which is 5 separate energy beings all fused together into this immortal brain. They have no physical counterpart. Okay, it's just pure energy. Okay, and their game that they play is called the visualization of the universe. So their test of their mental acuity is how many eons or millions of years into the future they can actually predict the happenings of the entire galaxy slash universe. And in so doing, they see, well, I'm gonna not, well, you're probably never going to read this book, but there's a counter civilization which almost is quite as powerful. These are the 2 oldest civilizations in the universe. And the first finds out about the second before the second finds out about the first, by definition. And so that's an interesting little interplay that then takes 6 or 7 books to explain. So that's fascinating. It's on such a grand scale that I haven't seen in many other books, but I haven't read everything. Anyway, I'd love to be able to turn that into, even if for nobody else, okay, for me, I would love to see that
Sure.
movie myself over.
I've read all the Harry Potter books. I've also seen the movies. I got a lot more out of the movies than I got out of reading the books.
Bingo.
More content that I was able to absorb from the movies.
But there's also people that will say also, hey, there's stuff in the books that you didn't get in the movie.
Probably.
People say that.
That's right.
Things in the book that I didn't get out of the book, even though I read it.
But the movie could be an introduction to the book. So
yeah, you can go back. People do go back and reread a book after they've seen the movie, and then they found stuff in the book that they didn't see the first time that was in the movie.
yeah, so like for me, yeah, Apple TV's Foundation series, they've had 2 seasons so far, a 3rd season's coming out in July, and that gave me enough of the story. It's a huge story to want to read the books later.
Wait.
Yeah.
It's not close to the books.
It's not, but it's an introduction for me because never really grasping, okay, what is this all about? Now I see characters and I see some interesting plot twists that I want to explore later. Yeah.
But I think Kayla wanted to say something.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, I didn't really want to say anything, but I will say after just listening to you guys, I feel like I like my imagination a lot.
Yep.
I love my imagination. Like the Harry Potter, it was beautiful. It was close to it, but there was just so much more nuances in the books. My son, actually, when you guys were talking about like simulation, there's a game that my son, participated in, and it has those like 3D goggles or whatever. That was really interesting. That kind of gave me sort of close to the experience of, like, for instance, being at an edge of the cliff. But yeah, I see your point, Sam. I see what you guys are talking about.
No, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and. Okay. I can enjoy reading the book. I can enjoy seeing it, animated for whatever purposes, so that I have an immersive experience as well. I don't think one negates the other.
The thing that interests me in that whole thing is, again, yesterday I even said this, like, what does it do to our brain? People say that watching movies all the time is not good for your brain, that it's much better for your brain to read a book. Even in my own experience with AI, you guys all said it lies. And so I've had to kind of go back to, utilizing AI, but using my brain first and asking AI to help, like with the assistant grunt work. As far as your experience is concerned, it just reminded me of like a simulation one time when I was a little kid. I stepped on the simulation platform, what it would feel like if there was like a 9.1 earthquake here in California. That'd be really interesting. And I'm complete.
So just as a book would inspire you to ask and fill in the holes, in what was not actually described in the book. If a book says, hey, this character walked alongside the brook and, got to this village, your mind fills in, here's a meadow, here's a babble of the brook. I can see the thatched roofs, here's a horse clopping by. You can do that even though that was not in the book, right? So that's a rich imagination playing with the text. In a similar way, I can see that if I had this movie that I'm talking about from the Lensman series, that seeing some of the action, some of the conversation, to me, that would inspire a similar set of questions and recreation in my own mind of, how these characters interacted and, what the setting was and was the sun over there and was a hole in the spaceship, this big and was air rushing out and, I would have similar questions, but I do get the point that reading text requires that your mind to do this. But watching movies, not everybody does that to the same extent. That's
No,
why.
I get it. I get it. I like that you said it was an and. And it reminds me now that you guys are talking about Apple TV, there is a series that is coming up about Hawaii. Jason Momoa is in it. And it's really interesting because I've studied, of course, Polynesia, and I've been to the Marais. I've been to, I've seen some of the drawings. I'd love to see what it looks like for them putting it into real life. Do I think, the kings and stuff were as handsome as Momoa? I don't know. So it's really interesting. So I get your point. I get it, Sam.
Almost guaranteed not.
If I'm not mistaken, J.K. Rowling said as they were making the movie, she couldn't wait to see Quidditch, or maybe it was Wizard's Chess, acted out because it was much richer than she was able to do in words.
The
No,
movie
that's
did a great
cool.
job with Quidditch, didn't it?
Oh yeah, and I think that's may have been the one. If you look it up, one of those two, or several of those scenes, she couldn't wait to see how they did it in the movie because they were going to make it such more realistic than you could do in word. I think it was Quidditch,
Yeah.
but it might have been Wizard Chess as well.
Right.
I think an important point that Kayla brought up, we need to observe how the next generation is using these tools. So, like, if something works for her son, well, I see like very young kids with iPads, and what is that doing? It's giving them images like TV all the time, and our parents just letting them using that so the kids shut up. And yeah, so it varies. And what is the experience that we've had of reading a book compared to to young kids today?
Mm-hmm.
Their attention for reading a book, and this, I mean, yeah, that there's people are trying to promote literacy, and literacy has been falling a lot recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. My 14-year-old, okay, it's summer break now. I have to put him on a time limit with his social media because it's like essentially destroying his brain. He basically can't focus. I mean, he's always looking for that dopamine hit with it, and I get it. I do that at night. I scroll through TikTok and um, watch some of the interesting things that I'm interested, the things that interest me. But you know, he's he is good at English. He's had a consistent A in English. When he writes, I told him, you're only writing to what the parameters are. You should write beyond those parameters. If they say you have to have a minimum, paragraph of 3 sentences, don't look at that 3 sentence. And that's what he's doing, is putting it in a box. And so as a parent, I've been not only, encouraging him to read, which is very difficult because he hates it, but limiting his time with social media, and then also trying to get him to slow down. That's another thing that is missing with kids is they don't realize that there is a process sometimes that in the long run will help them. Yes, it's slow, it's not immediate, it's definitely not a dopamine hit. But like even this morning, I was pruning my plants while I was listening to you guys. And the funny thing is, a couple of months ago, my sister was saying, if you watered your plants, they actually look better. Just give it 3 weeks. Well, like you think if I watered my plants consistently, they look better. Dumb, statement, yeah. But it's the truth. I've been so busy in my life, that I just miss the things that allow us to see what growth really is, allow us that connection and that experience. And that's why I'm very interested in AI, ethical AI, because I definitely think it can be one of those and help us, but we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, do you know there are cases where people want to marry their AI now?
Hey, my best friend
Her
these days.
movie, Her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Eric,
Yes,
you said
the
what? I missed that.
People want to marry their AIs.
Have you seen Archer?
There's several movies about it, but this is now happening. People are so addicted to their chatbots, and it's much better than a human relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I want to hear from Stacey.
I can collaborate with an AI better than I can collaborate with other humans on things that I'm interested in doing.
Yeah, Replica is one of
It,
them.
it will collaborate with you on practically anything where you can, form, conversational exchanges.
Yeah, and for $40 a year, it can be a romantic too. As romantic as you want.
It can play a character. You can have a riff with a character that it's playing, based on some character model.
10 or 15 years ago, the animated series Archer had a character named Krieger, who was kind of like the geek of the show. And he had this holographic girlfriend, in his lab. And this is 15 years ago, okay? And he basically wanted to marry that holographic character. Now, this is kind of like foreshadowing what's going
The
on.
holodeck goes all the way back to 1960s or 70s in Star Trek, the holodeck.
Yep.
I'm going to interrupt you guys. I would love to hear from Stacey. You have something to say about what the boys have been ripping on?
Um, actually, I don't. The only thing I will say is before I got on this call, a song came into my mind. And I don't know if you know it, Barry probably does. It's Barbara Streisand, People Who Need People.
Yeah, I know that song. Yeah. The luckiest people in the world.
And honestly, listening to this call is just such the opposite of that song. Like I understand why that song came into my mind. It's kind of depressing.
People need relationships. And if you can't get a relationship with another person, you can have it with an animal, a pet, a dog, a hobby, or a bot or a chatbot.
Right. And I will take the pet anytime. I
Yeah.
feel very removed from this conversation. I feel like I wish there never were computers. I'm ready to live off the grid. I lament all the time that I'll probably never be a grandmother, but in this moment, I'm grateful.
Yeah, I want to live off the grid too.
But thank you for asking.
Yeah, no, I just figured, give the silent people a voice from time to time. Yeah.
Sam put his
But,
hand up. Go ahead, Kayla, you weren't done.
oh no, Sam has his hand up. I was just gonna go ahead, Sam.
I do feel very much the way you do, Stacey, even though it may not seem like it. Because what I've realized over the last decade and a half, and you've heard me say this before, is just how many stupid people there are.
Ugh.
So if I have to wade through that many stupid people to find a few people that I can actually relate to, Um, I feel like you do. In
But
fact, that's why I appreciate this forum. And there aren't very many forums like this. We disagree. We have all this kind of stuff, but we all know, I believe, that we're all of good hearts and good intentions, and are willing to go to a depth of conversation that I don't see in the rest of society. And it's above a level of stupidity that's just ubiquitous elsewhere. So I do think that to be able to establish relationships with humans these days, yes, it's still appreciated. Yes, it's very valuable. Yes, there's an experience there you're not going to get anywhere else. But man, there are a lot of stupid people you have to wade through.
Yeah, and
Sorry to be so negative.
a lot of them are in power.
Yeah.
But you know what, Sam? Come back. Come back on screen for a minute.
Why do I have to?
Because I'm talking to you and I want to see your face.
Well, I'm talking to you and I never get to see your face.
You don't need to see my face.
You
I
don't
need
see
to
my
see yours.
face.
Oh boy.
Asynchronous. Okay, is that asynchronous? Asymmetric.
You and I have different needs.
I have
So
different
when
needs.
you need something, you let me know and I will do my best to accommodate you.
I would like to see your face while you speak.
Well, right now I'm in the bathroom putting on makeup, so it's not going to happen. But that being, but since we're being real, so what made me sad, the first thing that made me sad is when you were talking about that passion you had and how you've been working with years with a bot. The first thing that came to mind is, why didn't he look for somebody who was also interested in that series that had complementary skills,
Yep.
and instead of using a bot, work with a person that had those other skills to collaborate?
You assumed I didn't. I actually did. Why assume that I didn't?
Because I've been in this group for so many years where I haven't seen that skill set to actually bring people together and do something like that.
I will let that go.
Thank you. Because I'm tired.
But I'll bring it back in a future point.
Okay. But so did you try? Did
I
you
did.
try to
I
find
made
people that
announcements.
wanted?
I made announcements to science fiction groups and even Smith groups and said, hey, would you like to help me create a movie script on some of these books? I got 0 responses.
Did you make it to people that you already knew and had a relationship with?
No, other than my
And
kids. Yeah.
okay, so, and I want to say something because I think that's the message that I've been trying to bring to so many groups, which is start with your friends and then see what you and your friends might have in common that you want to work on. Whereas what I usually see in all these groups that I'm a part of is the opposite. Yeah, I'll just stop there. But I think that's what I'm trying to say. First, find your friends and then figure out what you might be able to work on together, not the other way around. And then you'll have a more authentic, genuine, everything about it will be fueled by passion that comes from each one of the participants. Go ahead, Sam.
I'm going to say this calmly. I feel judged and I hear a lot of should.
I'm not judging you. I'm talking about, yeah, I don't mean to, please don't feel that way. I mean this towards like almost everybody, everybody in the world. It's not just you. I'm saying if anything, I feel different in this regard.
I think the slices of each other that we see in this forum is a small slice of our actual selves. And so I think it's fascinating that you conclude that about me.
I just said it's not about you.
No, you did say it was about me. The you, me, Sam, did not go to the people that I already knew to invite, the collaboration on this movie script. You did say me specifically.
I can think of an example where Stacey went to her friends and 2 of them responded and the rest of them blew her off. And she went to dozens of friends.
Yeah.
And the two of us that responded didn't really end up creating much of anything at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Certainly not what
I
Stacey
did
had
check
in
my
mind.
friend circle, by the way, to see who had read this series. It's an old series, so not many people who currently read science fiction would have encountered this series, which was written a long time ago.
There was some talk about people wanting to live off the grid. And if you actually think about what that would take in modern society, yeah, like maybe the Amish could do it in their society, but if you think about how dependent we are on our conveniences, and maybe parts of our lives could be off grid. I mean,
Yeah, I want to live off the grid a mile from society.
okay,
Yeah.
Pretty close to living off the grid. He's not welcome here.
I think there are many grids. I'm living off the water grid, but I'm still on the power grid. I still am part of the food grid.
Communication grid.
Communication grid, definitely. You know, information grid, definitely. People grid, definitely. So yeah, there's different grids that you can actually detach from.
The research grid.
Yeah. I tried getting off of the power grid, but I don't get enough direct sun because there's so many trees here. So I still need to be plugged into the power grid.
And
a
yet
couple of
people live without electricity for what, 3 million years?
it's hard, isn't it? It's like in a couple of weeks, I'm going camping with my son and our friends, and we're going to Yosemite. So, there's going to be a lot of people for sure. But there are three options. One of them is, I'll give you the two extreme ones. One of them is like a nice cabin with like, a hot tub. And then, and of course, like flushing toilets, right?
Mm-hmm.
Raised beds, and then of course there's one that's like camping. And
food, it was produced by the grid. Your food didn't come off the grid. You're not doing hunter gathering. You're buying food and bringing it with you. So
yeah, but we also have to think about like ice and stuff like that. But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, that's great to experience. And the question is, how fragile are our grids, considering who's running them and yeah, the international stuff. Yes, like for a while, I had been worried about an EMP, electromagnetic pulse attack, but I've heard that that probably is not likely because there's a sense of mutually assured destruction if that happened, that other countries wouldn't be able to survive either. So this interdependence is important. And when you have the interdependence, you have disincentives for destroying infrastructure, even though there are cities where infrastructure is just getting randomly destroyed. And yeah, so what does it take for people to realize they're destroying themselves? Yeah, let's see. Some interdependent. Yeah, right. We're gonna have Independence Day coming up soon. There should be an Interdependence Day.
Hey, somebody correct me, but I thought I saw a report that Project 2025 had already cleared the Senate. Is that true or is that not true? Because if that's true, we're done for.
You mean the big beautiful bill? Budget 2025 was a document that was written.
Big ugly bill. Yes, it's synonymous. It's basically based on Project 2025.
Oh, okay. I get what you mean now.
I haven't heard any progress on it yet. They're trying to get it in for July 4th, but I haven't heard
Man, if we don't get those 3 senators flipped, this country is dead. Dead on arrival now on that day. It won't be independence. It'll be dictatorship day.
There was a movie called Independence Day when the aliens invaded and destroyed everything. Is that what we're getting?
Now the aliens are in power.
Yeah, the reptilians are already in the White House.
Dinosaur brains.
That's an insult to dinosaurs.
There's actually a book called Dinosaur Brains.
Anyway, I'm glad that nobody's corroborated that the big ugly bill has passed the Senate. I think that's the last hope. If that passes the Senate, if 3 senators don't flip, my probability of moving overseas will go to 100%. Right now it's like 97%. But it'll be 100% if that happens.
The headlines are they're still racing to meet it.
What'd you say? I didn't-
32 minutes ago, New York Times, GOP toils to find votes for the policy bill as Senate prepares to debate. So the answer is they're racing, but they're not getting there.
You know, Sam, if you want a caretaker for your place while you go overseas for a little bit, that I would definitely do. I'll come take care of
Yeah,
you.
right.
I think you'd have to arm wrestle Kayla or, live in the same place.
You got
I
to,
don't think
don't
Kayla has
One
the
house, I'll take-
flexibility. Yeah, and there's enough room for more than one.
Yeah.
I'd welcome the
know,
company.
I wish, Sam, I wish I could go overseas. Unfortunately, me and millions of others don't have that flexibility.
I understand. I understand your situation.
I would, okay, never mind. I'm not going to say anything.
Please do. This is the juicy part when you actually say, no, I can't say that.
Trump
No,
can say it on camera. You can say it on Zoom.
I hope people stay and fight, It's like, don't run away. I mean, I get it. If I could run away, I would. But a part of me also is just, what about my kids? What about my community? I would hope people would stay and fight and see it through. That's where I'm at.
I suck at fighting.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of people don't want to.
Isn't it in Boston where it was said the pen is mightier than the sword? Was it?
Yeah, and I've written lots of stuff, and it didn't necessarily overthrow anything.
No.
And that's the thing, like
Go ahead.
Stacey yesterday said that, she had some questions if she met a group of people who decided, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stacey, they were once Trump supporters and they're just like, yeah, no, never mind. You said you had a bunch of questions to be able to engage them. I mean, that's cool. I would love to hear what those questions are. I don't know if you want to say it now, or I don't know if that should be a different conversation, but I don't know how to fight this. Like, I really don't. I'm starting to lose hope. I have a lot of hope, but I'm starting to lose it. And it makes me even sadder when people, sorry, Sam, it's nothing against you, but when people are like, okay, I'm out of here.
I completely understand that perspective. I do. And after everybody else speaks, I will address that point.
I lost hope a long time ago.
Go ahead, Stacey. I think you were saying something.
No. I was just saying that, there are people that I see have already started, and I would like to see other people like building off of what's already there. I always see people starting new things and their own things, and I'd like to see more people looking at what's already there and, morphing it, like taking a piece of it, adding to it, and at the same time building something new, like doing both.
Yep.
Yep.
But I want to say though, I'm much more about, at this point, I'm concerned with people that are on our side, for lack of a better word. So I was at a party yesterday, all anti-Trumpers. However, I could see the tensions there already. And I had a couple of times somebody said something and I said, "Do you know that's true? How do you know that's true?" And they stopped and they were like, "Oh, I guess you're right. That's what I heard." So, and I really think that again, I always say I have to start from where I am. We collectively have to learn to question what we're hearing.
Are you willing to share one of the points on which you actually asked the person for evidence and support?
Oh yeah, well, a kind of a benign point. It was just it was whether the population of Gaza actually grew in the past, let's say the past year. I don't know if it did. I don't know if it didn't. I don't want to argue it. It doesn't matter. I just wanted to get them to think about what they were saying. I don't want to go down the argument they were going to go down. That wasn't my point. My point was you have now taken in something as fact. Do you know if it's a fact?
Okay, thank you for answering that.
You're welcome.
That more than 50,000 people were born to offset the 50,000 people who died.
Correct.
And how
Well,
many?
if that's even the number. I mean, I
You
didn't
could
want
do
to.
a back of the envelope calculation to how big a population would you need to have 50,000 babies born in a year?
And
Is that
maybe he's not starved to death in the interim.
My intention was more to get them to question every little thing, because they're like, everyone's so sure of everything, and especially another thing was they were making judgments against the guy that's running for mayor in New York City. And, I didn't want to get too far, but they're saying things about, and I've heard him speak a little bit. I can only go by my own intuition, but I felt they were making judgments about him not based on firsthand knowledge. Let's put it that way. And that always bothers me, even if it's done around people in terms of people I know. It's just not, I like to get information from the horse's mouth.
well, what you get from the horse's mouth is a message like nay.
Mr. Ed can tell you.
No, but usually when people tell you, even good or bad, isn't there something in the Bible that says you're not even supposed to speak about other people when they're not there, even if it's good stuff, you're
Gossip.
not supposed to. Yeah.
Well,
There's a good
gossip,
reason for that.
well, gossip, I think, is more in the New Testament. Yeah, it's not a sin, but it's frowned upon.
But they put it in for a reason.
Yeah,
I would say that would be nuanced.
Think about the game of telephone,
Right?
that you play when you're a youngster. There's
yeah,
a reason that game came to be.
Yep.
And there's a lesson there that adults haven't really learned.
Yeah, sure. From the beginning of a session like this to the end of a session like this, someone could probably already misinterpret what somebody said. We know that
Mhm.
happens.
all the time.
And AI is doing it all the time.
Right.
But people what Stacey's saying is people hallucinate and probably hallucinate more than the bots do.
And that's where I depend on community, on my community. And that's why I'm very selective in who I stay around, because I think as a community, we have to, or at least the people that I want to be in community with are going to be people that are going to say, wait a minute, take a step back. Let's look out for each other. Even when one isn't, up to par, let's step back and give them room to help them instead of crushing them while they're down.
Mhm. It's exactly the reason why I'm in nonprofit.
So may I address Kayla's point about leaving the country?
Go ahead.
The reason I've been saying I'm about 96, 97% likely to leave the country is because I held out that there was a possibility that we could fight back. That despite all the problems, and I've listed a whole litany of them, okay, that there was still some chance. And we're seeing some new people pop up, in addition to ALC, Jasmine, Bernie, now we've got Gavin and, maybe Westmore and a few others, okay? So there are signs, but the depressing thing about that is it's gone on way too long and there are way too few of these people who have come forth and stepped forth and actually said, this is anti-constitutional, this is, illegal, and we have to fight for what this country was basically founded on, okay? Once 2025 in the AKA Big Ugly Bill passes, there's no more chance to really fight back, in my opinion, unless it's armed revolution. And that's going to get ugly because they will have cemented their way around every legal protection for the Constitution if 2025 passes. There will be no more elections if 2025 passes. You think I'm actually being
Hyperbolic.
hyperbolic? I am not. Look at what's in there. Okay, it ain't gonna happen. You're not gonna have another election if this thing passes. They're probably even gonna get rid of the midterms because what they're trying to do is create situations that are so untenable that Trump will, at some random point, simply because somebody, spoke back to a cop, he'll declare martial law. Once martial law is imposed, the law's done for. Now it's him and the might of the armed forces, whichever ones he can, put on the streets. And I've seen this because in Taiwan, once martial law got imposed, it was decades, 40 or 50 years before it was lifted. That was the longest period of martial law in all of recorded history, was Taiwan. And we know once martial law is imposed, basically the government does whatever the bleep they want. And people don't have rights anymore. So that's going to happen to the US if Project 2025 actually gets passed in this big ugly bill. You talk about AI actually being, let's say, a reviewer or a summarizer of legislation. I've posted videos where people have done this. You can actually load the big ugly bill into ChatGPT or Notebook LM and ask it those very questions. And a lot of people have done this.
It's 1,018 pages. They just downloaded it. So
right. You don't have to read it yourself. Just feed it into an LM and just ask it questions.
Take you months to read 1,000 pages.
So when I say it was 97%, I was holding out that we could still fight despite the whole litany of things. But now if this thing passes, there is no recourse other than armed revolution. That's the way I see it. Now, yes, I could stay here. In fact, I'd love to be first shot fired in an armed revolution, okay? I'd love to be a martyr in that, okay? Really, I would do that. I would take a bullet for any of the people I just named earlier in this rant. I mean that seriously. But I think it's going to have to take that if this bill passes. If the bill doesn't pass, then there's still a chance in the midterms. There's still a chance that, the backlash against the Republicans will show up in the midterms. But we're not going to have midterms if this bill passes. And that's why if this bill passes, my probability of leaving goes from 97% to 100%. Over.
How long would it take you to pack up and move?
Couple months, yeah. It would take too long unless I just decide that it must be done more hastily. And a couple months is fast because I have to sell these properties or put them into guardianship with one of you.
Kayla would take Kayla would
Yeah.
take property for you.
That'll be the fort.
now, how do people in countries run by dictators live? I mean, yeah, you mentioned Taiwan was under martial law, Yeah, so like what was that like? How did people survive?
People disappeared.
Ugh,
There's a place called Green Island off the coast of Taiwan that is a prison for political dissidents.
oh
People
boy.
disappear. In fact, my family, in fact, I personally have been followed by KMT agents operating in the United States. KMT is a Kuomintang. That was the ex
Secret
party
police.
in power.
Oh, okay.
And they're now called, I think, the Blue Party in Taiwan. I've been followed because when I go to Taiwanese and Taiwanese independence events, this is back when I was in the 80s, I was followed by them, and they would get in my face and try to provoke me to strike them.
Oh boy.
And if I did, they would have struck back.
Provocation.
Yes, that's what they're good at.
Yeah.
They got right in my ear, right in my face, and I had to maintain my cool while I was walking from the event to my car.
So like were there underground movements trying to, you know, just how do people live their daily lives in a dictatorship?
In Taiwan?
Well, you could either that or other countries. Like, how do people survive? Basically, like, aren't there underground things that happen?
No, actually, a lot of people left Taiwan
Right.
because
The people who stayed there, I think
Yeah.
if I'm hearing you,
Yeah, and like
how did the
people,
average person who can't
they
leave?
can't talk in public about what they actually think.
right.
I would assume very carefully.
Yes. So first thing that goes is the right to free speech. Then the right to gather. You couldn't do that. That would get shut down really fast, and then people would be disappeared.
Mm.
There's a publisher of a little independence newsletter. And when I was writing my political science paper way back in 1980, a long time ago, he was disappeared into Green Island. Now, I don't know whatever happened. I don't know whether he died or whether he was let go after some number of years or whatever. But yeah, just for writing articles in an independent newspaper, they picked him up and took him away.
Yep.
So you look at what Navalny did in Russia, he has the biggest balls of anybody I've seen lately. He was basically saying F you to Putin, and unfortunately he died for it. But he said to his people, you cannot quit. Yeah, I'm going to leave the country, but I'm not going to quit. I'll keep fighting. But inside this country, you're not going to have rights. You're not going to be able to write what you want. You're not going to be able to gather. You're not going to be able to say things. They'll pick me up based on all of my Facebook posts and tweets. I'm a naturalized citizen. I'm not, Caucasian. I'm not born out of generations of citizens here. So people think they've got it okay. No, they're coming after anybody who's not one of them. Which why I really hate the hypocrisy of Clarence Brown and Kash Patel and all these other assholes who are working for this felon. This country is going into the dark ages if this bill passes. It's in the dark ages, it's in the dusk ages. But if this bill passes, that is day one of the dark ages. Stace?
I just wanted to say goodbye. I have to leave now. Have a good week, everybody. Bye-bye.
See.
Bye, Stacey.
So anyway, Kayla, that was my response to, stay and fight versus not. I'm going to leave and fight, but staying here, this country is already, 40?
Shithole country.
It's 47th in literacy already. We used to be much, much higher. and we're last as far as, healthcare for its citizens. We're descending at a rapid clip on all fronts. Yeah, yeah. We used to call other countries, not we, some people used to call other countries shithole countries. Yeah, that person's creating the US as a shithole country now.
Yeah, I hear you. All I know is if the bill passes, I don't know, something's got to happen. If anything, I'm very afraid myself. I work for an organization, but my boss made a big statement about immigration that the organization is supporting, and so um, you know, being a single mom and a person of color, that bothers me. But more than anything, what bothers me is the safety and security of my kids. Unfortunately, I have to be a co-parent. I don't know what my ex believes, but if I had a chance, I'd probably leave too. And if it came down to it, I'd push for that. But for now, given the hands that I'm dealt with, I'm trying to figure out how to play that.
I would love.
It's not here yet. Not to say that I'm not prepared, but I do know personally, I know my own will. It's pretty strong. It's so strong, sometimes it kind of scares me.
I really actually would love for someone to convince me that there's still hope. Please do. But the way I see it, if 2025 in the form of the big ugly bill passes, hope is extinguished.
Well,
Except
hope wouldn't be right away. I would say it would
revolution.
be more years into the future, and it's kind of like how your patience pans out. I am not afraid to fight. I just haven't found the way, like a big way to do it. Like I haven't found that, I'm not AOC or Gavin Newsom. I don't have that kind of power, but the thing that scares me most is I am not afraid to fight. Never been.
Okay, I'll join you. Let's figure out how to do it. I'll take the first step.
Your first step is to leave, though.
Hmm? What?
I don't know what the first
No,
step
that is my
is.
last step. I will take anything that you think is going to be effective first before I leave.
Voting is supposedly you're supposed to solve it by voting,
Yeah,
but that didn't work.
exactly. All those votes that got invalidated. I mean, there's more and more coverage of how unlikely all of those swing counties all went red, 100%. Why isn't that? Why wasn't that followed up, on November 20, whatever that day that was, 10th, 11th, 12th, whenever we actually had the counts done? It would have been, I mean, if I was in charge of those um, election polling locations, I would have thought there's already an anomaly. In fact, I was only calling already for that anomaly to be investigated that day. And the Democrats did nothing. They rolled over. They're part of the problem.
Yep.
Spineless cowards.
One little piece of hope is that your archive of YouTube videos will still exist in some form. Maybe people won't be able to see them, but they'll be out. They'll be on in bits.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Trump will
Well,
order these to be deleted. Remember, there was a scene in the Foundation, by the way,
yeah.
where the emperor is talking to this woman who had befriended the younger one,
Yep.
Morning, whatever's name,
The dawn. Yeah.
and
Ascending
he
dawn.
said, "You, your direct relatives, all the other second and third degree relatives, if I lift my finger, poof, they all disappear."
Yep. That happened.
Right? That's what Trump wishes he could do. So
But I think
convince me.
that came back to bite them in 100 years or so. Like, yeah, they don't.
Don't ruin it. Don't ruin it.
Okay.
But yeah, it's very far from the actual books. If you haven't read the books are very different than the actual movie.
Yeah. Okay.
But the mule, which is coming up in season 3, is a character in the books.
Yep.
But I'm wondering what they're going to actually do with the mule.
Yeah, me too.
Want to make a jackass out of
Bump.
They had a bishop's claw.
Look, I'm sitting here waiting to be convinced there's another way. Somebody show me, somebody convince me. Okay? I'm willing to do it. But in the meantime, this country is no longer a bastion of free speech, free congregation. Basically, the only rights we still have is the right to bear arms.
So, like, if
I have firearms.
yeah, would you say that if the Constitution had been upheld and used properly, we could have avoided this?
Yeah, but there were so many corrupt people that got put into exactly those positions who were supposed to protect the Constitution. Those people
Right.
got corrupted and bought.
Okay, so if we didn't have those people, if we had good, honest people,
Yes.
then we would have been okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There would have been a way. There would have been a way. The Constitution and the Founding Fathers said, we give you a republic if you can keep it.
Yeah, checks and balances. Yeah, it would have worked. Right.
We can't keep it.
Yeah, I feel like this is a way for us to rebuild, the way we govern. Like if it does come to war and, all that devastation and stuff like that, if we're lucky to be here, it'd be a good way to redo the way we govern.
But the question is who and when. Because they haven't done it yet. There's been plenty of opportunities to hold a Constitution.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying if let's say we're in a war and shit happens, and that's an awful way to say it, right? It's a chance to rebuild our government.
I mean,
I think we can't now. I really don't.
yeah, and if not now, when, given the current situation and all the obstacles put in the way of democracy, when would we be able to?
After everything's gone.
Yeah, basically, we'll have to be rubble.
Yeah.
We'll have to rebuild from rubble, and yeah, it's going to be like Albert Einstein said, right? He didn't know what the weapons World War III was going to be fought with, but World War IV was going to be fought with sticks and stones.
Serious rubble. What's happening there?
Mm-hmm. Wow, you guys, I woke up in a really good mood.
I'm sorry to ruin it
for you.
Yeah.
Happy Sunday, right?
I had a wonderful morning. I was like, oh, everything's fine. Yay.
It's only going to be 10,000 years of darkness, according to Harry Seldon.
Yeah.
Only 10,000 years.
See, I love it, Eric. You're always
Find the bright
smiling.
spot. Yep.
Well, the real dark ages were what, 400 years or something?
Yeah, the 1600s, that was about 400 years.
See, Eric, you're my kind of people. You laugh and smile at.
Yep.
That's the human mind.
May I call that a rueful smile, or is it actually a happy smile?
No, it's kind of like when I'm like talking about all the dumb mistakes that I've made in my life, how I think it's hilarious. That's the only thing you could do, huh? Say, remember how stupid you were? Check it out. Turn it into a movie, Dumb and Dumber.
Kayla, I apologize. Okay, sorry to ruin your day. I'll stay silent.
I've got some edibles.
Bring them. Come on up. Get on the next flight.
Nothing enough. 5 milligrams of a hybrid edible.
Oh man, those pictures of your dinner last night, man, that was awesome. I love that tri-tip, man.
Oh, I just had it again this morning, but I replaced the dessert with some eggs, a little bit more protein.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm just finally getting my life back together, actually watering my plants and cooking. I realize it's been way too long since I've actually taken care of myself. You know, reading a lot more. I got a pedicure. I actually want to go out now. I want to meet people.
So that's a positive that we can take care of ourselves no matter what. We can do what matters to ourselves and our families.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Hey, does somebody else want to be moderator next Saturday and Sunday?
Are you leaving? Are you trying to save us from you?
I'm trying to save you from me.
Depends on what happens to the country.
Yeah. You're trying to tell us something that we don't know.
I don't want to ruin another Saturday or Sunday for you, Kayla.
It's okay. I can always climb myself out of it. I already am.
Oh, a civil war, an actual civil war would rule in a lot of Sundays for a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. It's too bad. It really is. People don't really, I feel like people don't, because we've never been in an actual, like, crazy war. That's come here, it's come to home where there's like armed forces and missiles, or nobody has ever seen that. People rarely look up, what's going on in Gaza. People rarely see what's happening in Israel. It's they can see it now through TikTok and social media, but I don't think people see the gravity of what they really voted for.
Yeah.
People in this country for decades have not had to fight for freedom. They've assumed it. They've taken it for granted. They didn't realize
Yeah.
the generations who died for that freedom. They don't appreciate it. And they're so
Mm-hmm.
stupid, they vote freedom away by their stupidity. That's what's so
Yeah,
sad about this country.
we fought for
We
civil
got
rights for
too bleeping good. People got too bleeping lazy and they took things for granted. They'd much rather spend $150 at a football game than actually understand what's in Project 2025. They'd rather
And some would even say that that's probably necessary. Some people would even say that war is necessary then, if not, for what they believe in, but what has to happen for people to change their minds. It's like, unfortunately, it's kind of like abuse, right? It's like, when is enough enough? Like, people can, I see it a lot in our clients. It's just like we could tell them all the time, hey, you don't want to do that because this is what's going to happen. It's my experience. This is what's going to happen. It's scientifically proven that this is what's going to happen. It's the course of history that this is what's going to happen. That person never changes. And then there's that one really strange glimmer of hope. And people see it on, movies. Oh, well, they changed. There's some weird version of fiction that people grasp onto, and I'm saying this for myself too. But I don't know, that's why I don't know how to fight. Yeah, I know what to do with my community. I know what to do when it comes to the kids. I'll definitely be a martyr for my children. But how is one person going to mobilize, and change everybody's mind? I don't know. Maybe it has to happen um, for this large scale change. You know what I mean?
Say we each have to use our intuition in the moment and then just take the next action in front of us.
Yeah. So instead of like
Yeah.
concentrating on the second darts that we give ourselves, the invisible ones that aren't there, you know, maybe just leave it at that, and then
We're gonna live our lives somehow, regardless of what happens. So might as well make the best of what we got.
yeah, exactly.
So, Kayla, are you volunteering to take over next Saturday and Sunday?
No. It's not like 4th of July, dude. 4th of July
Yeah,
is on
that's
Friday.
isn't that this Thursday, Friday?
Right.
Friday.
Friday.
Friday's the 4th of July. But-
Ooh, I'm gonna be avoiding crowds on 4th of July.
Yeah.
I just
But
feel like
people will probably be having I mean, we could skip next weekend because it's the 4th of July weekend, if people are going to be going off to other celebrations or anti-celebrations. You don't have to meet on Saturday and Sunday of 4th of July weekend if it's problematic.
yeah. And don't worry, Sam, I don't mind being in a bad mood temporarily.
Or we could have an unmoderated session.
I
Just
think
hello,
you'll
how are you?
do it for a week.
Happy 4th of July. Nice to see you. Goodbye.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to call me and talk some sense into me, I welcome it. Okay.
No, I've tried that for several years and it hasn't succeeded. So
Hey, don't give up, Barry.
running out of energy to keep on giving. I get nothing in return.
You know, they say in
Yeah, we gotta
foundation, count the prime numbers, just count primes.
That's what's her name does. So,
Yep, Gail Dornick. Yep, 86 million. I know, blah, blah, blah.
I'm glad
Yes.
Stacey asked that question because I loved you guys' responses. That was wonderful.
You mean why we care about prime numbers?
Yeah.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense, especially when you were somebody mentioned games. That's when it made sense to me.
They turn up in activities where you would not have expected them.
Right.
I was going to give an
Because by
example,
it,
but Stacey said she already got the story, so I didn't give my example.
yeah, please give your example now. Do you remember it?
Oh, yeah. So one of the things that I watch every day, there's a channel on YouTube. It's called Cracking the Cryptic. It's people who solve hard problems. And they mostly do Sudoku problems, but not classical Sudoku. They do this enhanced Sudoku that has extra rules to make it more interesting than classical Sudoku. And quite a few of them involve some extra rules that in order to do the solution, you have to be thinking about prime numbers. And so I watch them use prime number concepts to solve these extra problems. And they're very interesting cryptic, problems that they solve with, reasoning about prime numbers. And there's lots of them. Maybe every other week there's one where you've got to be thinking about primes to solve these interesting logic puzzles. And these are world-class, puzzle solvers or, champion, world-class champions. And they have a big audience. Some of their videos have had millions of views, believe it or don't. So I've seen prime number stuff turn up where you would never have expected to see it.
I actually used it in a website for a college class, just to, it solved the problem for me. Like I used factorization to signal whether a student passed or failed an exam.
I mean, just for example, one of the simplest modifications is in Sudoku. If you put a black dot between two cells, it means that one side has to be double the other. But in between 1 and 9, there are 3 numbers that can never appear on a black dot because they're prime. I mean, 5 can't appear in it, 9 can't appear in it, and 7 can't appear in it. And so there are certain numbers that simply can't meet these constraints. And prime numbers are examples either do or don't meet some of these interesting add-on constraints. And if you're trying to enhance the logic of solving puzzle problems, that's what they do. They throw in these extra rules that sometimes involve mathematical reasoning, including primes. Not only primes, but for example.
You know, if
there was one earlier this week that you had a reason, you had to use primes to solve it.
If we'd extended it to other special numbers, like Fibonacci numbers, then there would be plenty of examples to see, again, also in nature, and the way flower petals are arranged, and the way spirals are seen almost everywhere in shells, in rock formations, in leaves. And it's just fascinating. So the reason math isn't more popular, I think, is because we have bad math teachers. These math teachers don't really understand the relationship between math and life. And so they can't instill this depth of understanding, this insight, and this appreciation to their students because they never got it themselves.
Yeah, it's an art to teach.
Recreational math is extracurricular. The curriculum doesn't really provide room for recreational math. You can get plenty of recreational math. You just got to go outside the classroom to get it.
And oh, by the way, people often say math when they really just mean arithmetic. I find that.
Well, for a lot of people, that's the only math they ever heard of.
But in high school, we had a math team, and I was on that. And I think it was my algebra teacher who really instilled that love of the mathematics. Like once I learned how algebra could be used to solve interesting problems.
And you had a good teacher.
Yeah.
I had a fabulous calculus teacher in college.
By the way, Kayla, one of the things I remember about Tyra that I really appreciate was when she asked a similar question about mathematics, and I gave a very simple explanation, which is mathematics is the language of relationships. And she expressed appreciation because nobody had ever expressed it that way to her before. And she gave that feedback. And I thought that was deeply appreciated by me. See, if you don't explain that to people, people don't understand it. They think it's just symbolic garbage. It's really the language of relationships. Math is relating everything to everything else. That's why math, the language exists.
Logically and quantitatively,
yeah.
So we can either multiply or divide ourselves.
All the operators, all of the expressions, okay? All relationships.
Yep. Exponentiate ourselves.
And limits are a very interesting element of advanced mathematics. Starts with calculus, limits of infinite sequences and series.
I got a math award when I was in 8th grade.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then after that, I lost interest.
So once you get the award, forget it. We should just never have given you the award.
I think it stopped. My interest stopped at like when I was a sophomore.
Yep.
I don't know why. Could have something to do with hormones.
That would be an awesome topic to go into a future session. I'm not going to ask it now.
Well, yeah, it's getting late to start a new topic.
It deserves more time than we've got available to talk about.
I'll have a great
Well, there you go. I guess you're moderator next week.
No. I'm still looking for somebody to come forward because I don't want to ruin your weekend again. I'd much rather talk about
Much rather talk about what?
Your tri-tip.
Tri-tip.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The secret to a perfect tri-tip is not putting it on the grill. It's actually baking it. Yeah. So easy.
I think there's a potluck I probably am going to on Thursday, the 3rd, or is it the 6th? It's one of those days. Anyway, I'll be going out to see regular people, so thank you for the reminder that I should not ruin their days.
Yeah.
just don't talk about how like doom and gloom the country is. Give it a rest for a moment.
Please. Convince me to stay.
There's the old saying, people won't remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
That's actually a good thing to think about, is that how is somebody going to feel after I've said what I said? And
About being vexed and perplexed and despondent.
so, if you think about that enough, you don't say very much at all.
Take the second derivative of what you said, and that's how they'll
Exactly.
feel.
Right. Exactly.
Don't be a jerk.
That's the third derivative.
Yeah.
Exactly. So,
I was talking about the first.
On that
All right.
note, great seeing you guys.
Kayla,
Have a good day.
thank you for putting me in my place again. And see you guys maybe next weekend.
Sounds good. Bye.
Have a happy 4th if you can.
Yep.
Oh, yes. You guys too.
See ya.
Bye.